Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are here with another amazing group of writers to talk about a topic that I think is going to be of interest to many of you who are writing nonfiction books. I am Michelle Jackson. I'm the founder of the Black Writers Workspace. I am also the founder of directtoauthor.com. I'm a three-time published author, and I have been hosting these pen pop posses for a number of years. I'm so excited about it. But this one I'm really excited about because we're talking about nonfiction writing, and we have a group of dynamic writers here to discuss this topic. So let's bring them on the screen so you can get to know them and we can get into this topic in a big way. But before I do that, I want to say this. Find us on Facebook and share it on your page, as well as subscribe to our YouTube channel. We would love to have you. We are at BW underscore workspace. That's on YouTube. You can also find us at author Michelle D. Jackson. Find this link and share it on your page. So you are live. You can see us. We can see you. We can see your questions anyway. And we do ask that you drop those questions in the comment area. But before we get to that, we want to introduce our speakers. Hi. Hi, everybody. We have a big pen posse today, everyone. So we're going to have fun. We're going to be talking about nonfiction conversation for you because you get an opportunity to learn from people who have been there and done that. Okay. You get to ask them questions about their writing process. But today we're going to take a different angle from this because we're going to be looking at this from the perspective of healing the Black community. So when we write nonfiction as Black writers, I feel like we have a double responsibility. One is to, of course, always put out great work, but the other is to make sure that we are tackling some of these issues that are very specifically impacting the Black community. Now, all nonfiction isn't self-help. Some of it is memoirs, cookbooks, autobiographies, a host of other things. But when you're writing nonfiction, you are writing fact. Okay, you're talking about history. You are looking at real events and real people. And so that's what makes it so dynamic and so different from our fiction writers. I am a fiction writer, but I also have a youth entrepreneurship book that teaches kids how to start businesses. And I put that in the nonfiction category, although it's a comic book. So we're going to be talking about this. And this is so key because of this extra layer that we have as Black writers to heal the Black community. Now, are we here solely to do that? No, some of us want to talk about things that are entertaining. Some of us want to tell our stories. But today we're going to really focus in on how this work is healing, inspiring, and educating us as we deal with what I call our cultural barriers of care. And what that is are those ideas, beliefs, stigmas that are embedded in the Black community that can sometimes keep us from progressing. And so we want to talk about how books can help us to heal from those things. And I don't know about you guys, but nonfiction books have really healed me. I remember coming out of college, had my heart broken. It was a book that got me through it. In the Meantime by Iyanla Vanzant. Anybody ever read that book? Oh, y'all, it was a blessing. So we've all taken on these nonfiction books. We are here to learn about the writers and what inspires them, but we're also here to ask questions and to grow as writers. So let's start with you, Dr. T. Talk to us about, we want you to do two things. We want you to introduce yourself, and we want you to tell us why you think writing nonfiction is important to the Black community.
Okay, good morning. Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm Paul Thornton. I grew up in Brooklyn and Long Island, New York, and I currently live in North Carolina, Mooresville, which is just outside of Charlotte. I am what you call an accidental writer. I woke up December 6, 2014, with no intention to write. And when I went to bed that night, I was well on my way towards writing my memoir. A year and a half later, at 60, I published my memoir, which is called White Man's Disease, which I will draw from for this discussion. So you're likely wondering what happened that fateful day in December of 2014 that I turned into a writer almost on the spur of, well, really on the spur of the moment. Um, as my daughter would say, what had happened was it was her wedding day, and I was tasked with giving a talk at the reception. Wasn't looking forward to doing that. And I said, well, what am I going to talk about? And she said, Dad, talk about memories of me growing up. And so that emotional, dramatic talk at the reception led to a catharsis in me of sorts. And as they say, there wasn't a dry eye in the place when I was done. And I couldn't wait to leave the reception to get back to my hotel room to capture my thoughts. And so that's when I became a writer.
So the
I'm
white
sorry, go
man's
ahead.
disease. So you're going to tell us a story. I know we're going to get to the bottom of that title because that title is very interesting. Talk to us a little bit about why do you think writing nonfiction is important to the Black community?
Well, not only writing but reading nonfiction. Speaking for myself, I currently write solely nonfiction. I've written 4 books, all nonfiction, and all I read is nonfiction. Although there was once a time when I was much younger when I liked fiction books, and I just think that it's important for our community to stay grounded by facts. Um, Reading nonfiction fosters continual learning. So a compelling, engaging work will motivate you to read another nonfiction work. And I think that once you've read a couple of good nonfiction books in a row, uh, you'll become a nonfiction reader. And when I say it's important for us to stay grounded by the facts, I'll give you a real quick anecdote. I'm a political junkie, so there's a lot of talk about the fact that young people don't vote. Young people don't vote because young people don't read, and so they don't realize what is happening with the Supreme Court, for instance, and how we are impacted by some of them not voting in 2020 and 2016. We are impacted by that for the next several decades. So that's just one anecdote of what I mean by becoming grounded by facts.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Paul, for being here. Paul actually was one of our winners for our Chapter 1 writing competition last year. Really excited to have him here. For those of you out there, be sure to drop your questions in the chat box. We're going to get to those at some point, definitely in this conversation. Also, I want you to do me a favor. Drop in the chat box the book, the nonfiction book that helped to change your life. I want to share some of that on the screen as well. So be sure to do that. And we have a lot of people out there that are watching and already commenting. So Dr. Paul, thank you so much for being with us. Emerald, you want to introduce yourself and tell us why is it important that we write nonfiction and why is it important for the Black community?
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Emerald Fowler, but my author name is Simone. I'm the author of the series Deceit, and I'm the co-author of the nonfiction novel The Double Standard that's coming out this fall. While I feel like nonfiction is important to the Black community is because we all go through similar experiences that could be difficult to talk about. And so nonfiction novels gives us clarity, support what we will be going through or maybe going through. And we could even learn from one another. So if you don't want to talk about it with your friends or family, and you don't think people can relate to what you're going through, then you can find a nonfiction novel that will give that to you, and it can help you through your healing journey.
So Emerald, tell me about your book. What are the topics that you are addressing in your book?
Yes. Me and my co-author Crystal, we call it the double standard because we are addressing sons and daughters and how they are parented differently. and a lot of people don't talk about it. It's very uncomfortable. We thought it was uncommon, but it is pretty common. And it's coming from all perspectives. From my end, it's coming from how my family dynamics were and how it evolved to me becoming a parent to my son and daughter. So I feel it's kind of like breaking generational curses. We're talking about our experiences, how it affected us, our healing journey, and how we feel about it. And I think it will touch a lot of people's hearts, and they will be able to relate in so many ways that we can't even imagine.
I love that. You're talking about how boys and girls are parented differently. Oh, yeah, we got to put a pin in this, y'all, because I want to hear more about this. That's a really,
Exactly.
really, really good topic. I love that. And you said a word I also want to put on that cultural barriers of care category, and that is generational curses. Something else that
Yes.
I rarely hear other cultures say that term, that phrase.
Right.
In the Black community is something that we talk about a lot, and those are those generational curses. And when we talk about generational curses, we're talking about things that were heavily maybe even inspired or impacted, of course, by who we are as a people. I mean, we are the descendants of former slaves, and so we bring with us a great deal of pain because of that. And so the healing process is something that has taken place, had to take place over generations. And some of the things that have impacted our families, we seem to pass on. Now,
Right.
whether it's true or not, we have a tendency to feel that we are passing on these things, especially things like poverty, um, giving birth to babies in our teens, financial issues, those types of things, going to prison. We think we label those as generational curses in the Black community. And we talk a great deal about how do we break those curses. And in these works that we're going to be talking about today, you're going to be hearing about different things, different ways that writers are addressing the challenges that they have faced over the years, or the challenges they've seen their families face over the years. So thank you so much, Emerald, for being with us. I do want to continue to talk about this boy girl thing because I have a son, and I say this all the time. You do raise boys differently. So love that. Ty,
Thank you.
introduce yourself for us.
My name's Ty Salvant. Speaking of the kids, I'm a mother of six, three boys, three girls. So we can definitely talk about that. I ended up writing my first book is A Mother's Reflection. It is a guided journal to help moms recall the mother they had, reflect on the mom that they are, and really question and kind of grapple with, are you being the mom that you want to be? And if not, why not? So you can start making changes to make sure that you are creating the memories, raising your kids the way that you want to, with a huge emphasis on self-care. Because you know what? One of the things that I've noticed with moms is that we will pour out everything that we have, like for our children, right? So we give like spiritually, financially, emotionally, physically, until we have nothing left. And we're raising boys with unrealistic expectations of their future spouses, and raising girls who don't want to have kids because they saw what their mom went through and they don't want to do that. So I really do, one of my goals or missions is to redefine motherhood to include self-care and self-compassion so that mom is an equal part of the family, as is everyone else. So we are looking at how we interact with each other, how we express appreciation for each other, how we love each other, and that it really becomes more of this two-sided deal as opposed to this one way with just moms pouring out.
Give me the name of your book again.
Sure. So it's called A Mother's Reflection. And one thing that was very interesting was that like I didn't intend to become an author. That wasn't something that like I always wanted to do. I do enjoy reading, but never thought I'd write something. But once I turned 30, my mom was like, I thought you would have written a book by now. And I was like, why? I've never expressed interest in writing a book. And she says, I don't know. I just thought you would have. So then every couple of years I would think, if I wrote a book, what would it be about? One year, Mother's Day happened, and it was a disappointing experience. We can get into that later. And I decided to reject what I was offered. I made a list of 10 things I would love or appreciate, and I left my house. I took myself to get some lunch to the mall, um, ice cream, and went on the lakefront and started reflecting on if I was being the mom I wanted to be, if I had taught my kids everything I wanted them to know before they left my house, which was the skeleton for the journal.
What I love about writing nonfiction is the fact that we're tackling real issues and pouring our hearts and minds off into it. And we have to get to a place of transparency and authenticity in order to get to that. And we're going to talk about that as well with everyone on the screen, because in order to really be um, a true nonfiction writer, you have to, what I always say, create a contract with yourself. And that contract is you saying to yourself that it is okay to share. It is okay to be honest, to let people know that you're not perfect, because that's what they're going to see in these books. You know, that's what these books are so healing to other people, is because the reader gets to see your transparency. So I love that. I love the idea of this dealing with this strong motherhood syndrome, or this idea that we have, this put on your cape as women
Hmm.
mentality that we have. And I'm going to talk about, I can say, you know, from a Black woman perspective, yes, that I know it's all women deal with this, but as a Black woman, yeah, I had a pen posse a couple of months ago, and we talked about, it was a bunch of women, and we were talking about wanting the soft life. And I never heard Black women talk about wanting the soft life. I'm going to be honest with you, never even heard the term, so the phrase soft life. And listening to women say, I'm tired of people seeing me as being so strong, was just amazing. Just having that conversation. So I'm glad that you're tackling this issue. I really am. So thank you so much, Ty, for being with us. Mel?
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Mel Vanderpool, also known as Mel V, her the MVP. Originally from New York, currently in South Florida. Um, I've been writing my whole life, but as a poet, since I was a child. And then through life and experiences, I ventured into the realm of being an author through a children's book. So my first children's book, there's two versions. It's called Do You See What I See? And it's a book of affirmation and reaffirming for children of color their worth, and basically letting them know that you are all these things despite what society, anyone may tell you that you're not. And so that's leading up to my upcoming children's book called I've Got a Secret, which further delves into defying what society has said your worth is. So, you know, whether it's your physical appearance or your hair or your eye color or anything like that, it talks about or teaches young children of color that, hey, I've got a secret. I'm way more than all of these things that you've pegged me to be. And then from there, I ventured into an author organization called the Diamond Writers with our lovely president, Natima Sheree, that's going to tell you about that later on when you get to her. And so with that, I've been a part of two anthologies called Beneath the Crown, Her Story, Her Power, Her Voice, and then Valid Transparency, Poetic Confessions of a Transparent Gem, where we tackle life, if I could put it as a whole, from our personal journeys and experiences and how we've been able to triumph through them, and overcome, and then providing tools and tips to other people who may be going through similar things but not sure how to come out on the other side.
Excellent, Mel. Thank you so much for being with us. I love that. You're dealing with self-worth when it comes to children. We have to start tackling these things earlier. And I love children's books because we can deal with hard topics with a fun bear, a great illustration, you know, short dialogue, and it can be so impactful. So we have to start early, getting in there and making sure that we're helping our young people heal. And I love the everything that you're doing when it comes to strengthening Black women and showing our strength and power, and you know, empowering us. So thank you so much for that, Dr. Wilborn.
Good morning, my fellow pen pals and pen posse listeners. My name is Dr. Tammy Lewis Wilborn. I am a New Orleans native, currently based in Nashville, Tennessee. I am a retired board certified licensed professional counselor and served in that capacity for 21 years. And so I consider myself and have been seen by others as someone who can speak with a level of expertise about mental health and wellness. I am a professional keynote speaker, and I'm also the author of Playing a New Game, A Black Woman's Guide to Being Well and Thriving in the Workplace, which is an attempt to really expand the dialogue on Black women's work experiences, specifically as it relates to how Black women's stereotypes of Black women, race and gender stereotypes of Black women create unique stressors that impact us professionally, but also personally. And so I talk about the mental and physical health implications of what happens to Black women when we buy into the idea that we need to play the game, and how that game is comes with a cost. And so this book is a mix of me search. I talk about specifically an experience that I had as a senior clinical leader, being the only and experiencing workplace discrimination, and what the fight for my name, my rights, and my reputation did to my mental and physical health, and how that fight led to research. It led to my doctoral research examining Black women's experiences, and specifically Black women who worked in positions that we would consider sort of lower on the hierarchy, because in research, those experiences were not captured in the research, right? We're not looking to understand what happens to women who, are not working in higher status positions, but lower status positions were the women I came from, right? I came from a working class background. And so it was important for me to bring those important voices, but often untapped voices to the research. And then that research became the catalyst for how I practice my mental health practices. So towards the latter 5 years of my 21 years as a mental health practitioner, a lot of my work was with Black women. And so I learned from my research how to ask specific questions about work and how work was a stressor. And then I realized that the work that I was doing was important, but it was work that was happening one session at a time. And I was the kid who always there's a meme going around, the kids that talk too much. I was that kid, right? Like I was a high achiever, never made more than a C in conduct. And so I always knew that I had something to say and I wanted to write, but like one of my other pen pals mentioned earlier, never knew exactly what I wanted to write about. It became clear to me session after session that Black women could benefit from having a book written by a Black woman, a Black mental health therapist, based on Black female research, based on Black clinical experience, to talk specifically about self-care and self-empowerment strategies that were evidence-based, not just what I thought or what I felt, but what the research shows, that can help them to be well, whole, and free. And so I heard you ask the question earlier about the importance of nonfiction writing to the Black community and Black healing, and what I like to say, Black liberation, is that what I've discovered is oftentimes we are waiting on them to tell us the truth about us. But what I realized, and we all know who they and them are, but what I realized is if they have to lie to see themselves, they're not going to tell the truth to see you. Mm-hmm. And so the work of nonfiction from Black writings and Black authors is saying, I am you, you are me, I see you, and I have something to say about who we are, where we are, and how we can be, again, what I like to say, well, whole, and free.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being with us. Yes, everything that you said. Absolutely. We totally agree with it. You cannot, no one can write our story or control our narrative when it comes to talking about the Black experience and what this experience has done to us, how we feel, how we're dealing with things. It is very, very personal. It's nothing wrong with a professional of any race giving their opinion about something from a scientific perspective and looping everybody in and saying this is what we've, this is what we have seen to be the truth based on scientific data, blah, blah, blah. But being in this Black body, living this world as a Black person, as a Black woman, as a Black writer, my experiences are not always the same as everyone else's. Okay. And so that's why this conversation is so key, because what we're doing, what we're trying to heal is something very specific to the Black experience. It's not just about everyone, it is very specific to our experiences on this continent at this time and dealing with matters that are impactful to us. Workforce issues, been there. When the Me Too movement hit, I remember thinking, yeah, I've been Me Too'd to sleep in the corporate world. I've dealt with things people cannot ever imagine. And honestly, you just deal with it because you're thinking about, I'm going to be the first to get fired if I bring this up, because those are things that I've seen happen. Our opinions about issues are different. So thank you so much. We're going to get into that transparency, that authenticity, your own personal story. We're definitely going to get to that. Let's talk to you, Natima. Talk to us, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work, and talk to us about why you think it's important that we write nonfiction if we're going to heal our Black communities.
Thank you, Author Michelle. High vibrations, everyone. I am Natima Sheree. I am the founder of Transparent Gem Inc., a boutique independent publishing firm, as well as the Diamond Writers. That is a writing collective and community dedicated to aiding BIPOC women in healing through writing and storytelling. By profession, I am a diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner in the tech space and part-time law student. And by passion, I am a 5-time author and writer and avid reader. So going back to what Dr. T said, the best writers are great readers as well. Oops, I lost the earring. 2 books I would love to highlight in particular, as Mel V mentioned, through my writing community, we have co-authored 3 anthologies, Pretty Broken, Valid Transparency, and Beneath the Crown, all dedicated to helping women share their stories on a platform that promotes healing and accountability. But 2 others that I wrote that specifically speak to healing are the Savage Healing Journal. This is an interactive journal. There are stories and activities dealing with women who just move from relationship to relationship without dealing with themselves and really healing from those prior relationships. There's so much damage that happens. I believe it was Emerald that referred to generational curses. And I'm a strong believer that there are no generational curses, but generational patterns, right? Because we're not cursed. We're amazing, blessed people, but there are patterns that we continue to pass down because no one breaks them. And so that's what this journal is dedicated to supporting and helping and aiding. And then the other book I want to highlight out of the 5 that I co-wrote is called Mascara, Beat Face, Broken Soul. And it talks about the epidemic, is what I'm going to call it, where we invest millions of dollars in body augmentation, makeup, hair, lashes, nails, and never deal with the inside. We look great on the outside, sis, we bad, but that inside is broken and it's toxic and it's hurting, and there is no makeup in the world, no surgery that is going to cover that. And so that's what we address in this book. Shout out to Tiffany Bethia, who co-wrote this with me, and this was an Amazon bestseller. So why do I think, storytelling, Black storytelling in particular, is important for our community? The power of Black storytelling helps us to control the narrative, as you mentioned, Author Michelle. I think it also speaks from a place of transparency and relatability so that people can actually see themselves in us. Like, oh, I've been through that. As Ty mentioned, being a mother who doesn't put herself first, we were taught your children come first, you're last. No, there are women who deserve to be first because we're better parents for it. And so those are some of the things that I believe happen, and we help to maintain culture through Black storytelling. So it is extremely important to me, and I've dedicated my life to doing it.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being with us. Keisha?
Hello from San Diego, by way of Baltimore's West Side. My name is Keisha Ha. I'm a proud alum of the city's largest HBCU, Morgan State. Go Bears. Attending a HBCU was my initial step for my personal journey of healing. And HBCU also gave me an understanding of how important community was. The bulk of my real education, though, was eavesdropping on grown folks' conversation, as they say, all through Baltimore's public housing projects, where I grew up in the 70s and the 80s. Those experiences planted the seed for my love of reading, and now serves as the basis for my current projects of capturing oral history, and it helps me with my work as a genealogist as well. I spent my early professional career as a newspaper journalist, and that's where most of my publications have come from. I write mostly now for my blog, BeMoreProjects.blog. I write as an essayist and a media watchdog. I began writing, analyzing media coverage to counter the official narrative around what occurred during the Baltimore uprising in 2015. I felt that that was necessary to tell our stories because the media's consumption of what was happening with regard to the Freddie Gray incident was skewed a little bit. So that's when I really started writing more for my blog. This year, I'm celebrating my 60th birthday, and I hopefully will memorialize it with the completion and hopefully publication of the book that's been germinating in my brain since I was in Knee Socks and Mary Jane's. Some of you won't understand that reference, but the story that's been germinating in my brain has been, how did we ever believe that there was just one Henrietta Lacks? If you're not aware of Henrietta Lacks, she was a young Black woman from Baltimore who, without her knowledge and consent in 1951, was her stem cells were harvested. And it was not the first time Hopkins used Black bodies as their personal hunting ground. This was oral tradition that had been passed down in Baltimore that has not been documented. So I felt like this is the story that I had to tell. So my book, Johns Hopkins, The Body Snatcher Hospital, details the impact the Black community has had, or that the hospital has had on the Black community, because its institutional founder was mythologized as an abolitionist while he was indeed an enslaver. So why is nonfiction writing important to the Black community? For me, as these years are ticking by, it's not just important, it's urgent. We need to do this, and we need to do it now. We're living in a time of extreme social polarization. There's fake news. We don't know exactly what to count on. Our institutions are under attack. The largest institution that as a Black community that we've placed so much faith in, the Supreme Court, is now is being turned over, and we really don't know what to trust anymore. So now more than ever, as other people have said, we must be the one telling our own stories. So that's why I'm here today.
Thank you so much. You said, I can't wait for this book to come out. So you need to make sure that we know when this book is coming out, because I'm really excited to read it. So thank you so much for being with us. Winifred, we're going to wrap up with you, and then we're going to get to our questions.
Hey everyone, my name is Winifred Summer. I'm so happy to be here today. So thank you again for the opportunity to be on this lovely panel with all these lovely people. I am an author of 3. So I have the Job Interviews That Changed My Life, which is an ebook, as well as Blame the Manager, another ebook. And then my most celebrated work is this one right here. It's the Toxic Job Playbook. where I talk about workplace toxicity. I give strategies and tips, ways to potentially avoid being in a toxic environment at work. I also help people with coping and definitely help people to find a way to escape, create a plan. And I'm very passionate about HR. I'm an HR specialist. That's my 9-to-5 gig. Some people know me as the HR darling, just because, there's a lot of things that people like to say about HR people, we don't care. And so I definitely am tearing down that idea that all HR people are evil. And so, this book has been helping so many people just kind of deal with workplace toxicity. So many people have dealt with it. Unfortunately, I wish I couldn't say that, but it is the truth that a lot of us have dealt with crazy workplaces. I actually started out in the healthcare industry doing medical credentialing, and there was just so much foolishness going on. And I had so many questions about, what is HR doing? Like, what can they do? What can't they do? Why aren't things changing? And so I actually changed my career, went back to school, got my master's degree in healthcare. I have a master's degree in human resources. My bachelor's degree was in healthcare administration. So I went back to school, got my master's, graduated with honors, and just really dived into this whole HR journey. And within the organization that I work for, there are only so many things that I can do. And so with this book, I felt like this was a way for me to touch many people outside of my workspace. And so that's what this is about. I'm first generation American of Haitian descent. So shout out to all my Haitians, gotta say that. And to your question about the importance of nonfiction writing with the Black community, it's just important for us to talk to us, so to speak, because I have written articles about toxic work environment and pitched it to places, and it's been published. And oftentimes those publications will say, oh, well, some people may not be familiar with your lingo or your slang. Can you change how you say this? Can you change how you say that? And I feel like when we write, from our perspective, the way that we want to speak, we connect to our special and specific audience. And it's important to be relatable. And so that's my response for that.
Excellent, everybody. Thank you so much. We got an opportunity to meet everyone on the screen. We have a bunch of questions and comments coming in. What we're tackling here with the books that we're writing, this is what I jot down. We're looking at health scares, workforce discrimination, self-worth, motherhood, entrepreneurship, healthcare. We are focusing in on so many different things that we're trying to educate our community about, because these are things that we struggle with. We struggle in every area, in my opinion, but our books are there to help us to identify where these areas are and how we can become a better person. We're going to do a quick round table, though, because I want to talk a little bit about these cultural barriers of care, these generational curses, these things that we talk a great deal about. We know there's racism, discrimination, and those are things that that we're all impacted by in many ways. But there are also ideas within our own culture that are stopping us from moving forward. Anybody want to throw out some of the ideas, some of these ideas, stigmas, taboo things within the culture that you were taught growing up that you have had to unlearn? Anybody want to? Winifred?
Well, I can say when it comes to the workforce, being Black in the workforce, I was told, just be grateful to have a job, just keep your head down, be quiet, don't challenge the system or shake the table, as people like to say. I grew up hearing that a lot. When I wanted to leave a job because it was toxic, people would tell me I was crazy. Oh, you're going to leave that good job. And I'm like, well, I'm telling you the type of experiences, the discrimination and all these things that I'm facing, but yet you want to encourage me to stay. So things like that, I think, is spread across the Black community. Me being of Haitian descent, definitely it was like, oh, you're gonna miss your blessing, walking around thinking that you have the authority to speak up. We all should be speaking up. So that's my answer.
Excellent. Absolutely. I love that. My first job was when I was in college. I worked at Sears and Roebuck. And don't get me wrong, I grew up in Alabama. My mother grew up in a different time. Okay. She grew up in a time where she had to go and buy shoes on Sundays because they couldn't go into the stores on other days. She saw the black and white, water fountain. So I understood that she had a level of fear about things. And that fear is what, in my opinion, helped to move forward a lot of these stigmas within the black community. But she would say when I went to work for Sears, because she loved Sears, I got my degree from University of Alabama. She said, just stay at Sears and work. That's a good job. And I remember thinking, So Dr. Wilborn, talk to us about what you heard growing up that you had to unlearn.
I actually worked at Sears Credit Central when I was in college. So yes. But I want to sort of pick up on the thread that Winifred, is it Winifred? Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you. That Winifred brought up, but also looking at the question that crime fiction media has brought up, and then trying to tie some of the themes in. So one of the reasons why I titled the book Playing a New Game is because in terms of, coming from a working class background, education was important. You go to school, get an education so you can get a good job. And so when I showed up on these good jobs, oftentimes there were very few Black or just not even just Black mentors, but just mentors, period. And so as someone who was interested in doing a good job and being effective at the work, I'm trying to, tap into what do I do to be successful here? And oftentimes, specifically from Black folks, the message was you got to play the game. Mm-hmm. And I always hated that message. One, because I never really knew what the game was. Two, because I didn't know it, I didn't know how to play it. And three, there was sort of this idea that in doing so that I would somehow win, right? Whatever the winning was. But what I learned in my own experience professionally and then later working with Black women and dealing with some of the workplace issues is that the game comes with a cost, right? There is a cost to playing the game. And oftentimes the cost is mental and physical, because there are those stereotypes that as Black folks we walk in, and specifically Black women, we talked earlier about strong Black woman as a stereotype. That stereotype came from a place. It came from Black women and girls. Let's be clear. Slavery wasn't just women, it was also girls. That what was happening to Black women and girls at the time, we were able to deal with that, right? That there was something different about our womanhood and femaleness that was different than that of others. And so there was this belief then that Black women are sort of superhuman in the way. And then we internalize that message, right? So you can't be weak. You can't show weakness. You can't struggle. You can't need help. Mm-hmm. And of course, we know we are not superhuman. We are human. We have struggles. We have challenges. And playing the game by denying our own humanity, the person who loses in that game is us. And so I really, I appreciate Winifred bringing up the toxicity, because oftentimes when we've internalized that we need to be strong and we don't, we should be grateful. I talk about that in the book. It leaves us in situations that cost us not only to be sick, but what we know from the data is that we're dying from it. And that's a message that is injurious that we have to break. And it's not a curse. It's a cycle. It's what's being passed down. Is I think it was Natima said, it's not we're blessed. We're great. It's not a curse, but it's a cycle. And these are the things that are being passed down that are perpetually keeping us sick, unwell, and what I would say unfree.
Absolutely. Ty? Absolutely.
So 20 years ago, I stopped working to stay at home with my children. And then after looking at school options, decided that I wanted to homeschool. And so my immediate family was fantastic and super supportive, but there was pushback, just especially amongst the Black community, for someone who is college educated to not work and stay at home and waste that education on their children, right? And so, just sending out the message that no, I'm not wasting my education on my children. I am pouring into my children and my community in ways that I would not be able to if I had a full-time job outside of the home. So, and I was a part of a Mocha Moms organization for years where Black women got together to support each other because, again, there are lots of moms groups out there, but being in a group where you could really talk to somebody who understood where you were coming from and who could relate to some of the things that you were dealing with culturally, like getting backlash from, especially like your grandmother, about not believing that you were wasting your education in ways that our counterparts didn't, was huge. And so really just being a voice to be able to share, especially when we look at what our children are experiencing and going through in schools, right? So I've loved having the ability to educate my kids, protect them from some of the evils and muck that's out there, but really just pour into them.
Excellent, excellent. Natima?
Thank you. And I'll keep it brief, but one of the generational patterns that I had to intentionally unlearn was survival mode. I was operating majority of my life in survival mode because I watched my mother do it, my father do it, my mother's siblings, everyone around me lived in this space of survival mode where we managed stress and everything was urgent and we were constantly combating, attacks and, these dangers that didn't even exist, things that we've told ourselves in our minds. And so having to recognize why I was operating in masculine energy was because I was in survival mode, which is a masculine quality, which is the protector and, that urgent leader. And so having to unlearn that, I realized how many of us show up in that space and in that posture every single day and don't even realize it. And I notice it in my kids. Everything is urgent about school and about their social life and about things that I asked them to do in the home. And I'm like, slow down. But I recognized that was a pattern that I was taught and one that I was passing down. So I had to put a stop to that one and unlearn that right away.
Nice. I love that. Mel? Then we're going to get to you, Paul.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I experienced, and not necessarily in my household, but within my community, even with my friends, was this concept of Black enough. Like, you don't talk Black, or you don't dress Black, or your hair, you got this hair. So it was always, you're not Black enough. And it was like, well, what's the definition of Black? So because I use pronouns, verbs, adjectives, I don't talk Black. So is there a different language? I thought we all speak English. I didn't know that there was a Black versus white verbiage. And so, or how you dressed, or the music you listen to, or the way you wear your hair. Like, I experienced that. And even sometimes now today I'll get, oh, you don't have a Black nose. I'm like, well, what is a Black nose? I'm Black, it's on my face, so it makes it a Black nose. But I feel like we've given into the definitions that were given to us of Blackness. And so we have stepped away from defining what Blackness is for us. And I'm like, I'm African American, I'm Black or brown, or however you identify. So whatever it is that I do is Black.
Absolutely.
That's me. And so that's something that I feel like even to this day, we still have those things where even have games out now about like Black card revoked and things like that. And it's fun, but it's still playing into that stigma of, well, if you don't do these things, or if you can't do these things, or if you haven't read this book or saw this movie or heard this song, then you don't quantify for your Black card. And it's just another way for us to depict where each other fits in the societal norms, which then causes a whole slew of other, insecurities and questions of self-worth and self-doubt and all the other stuff. So,
it's so funny. It's one thing that we got to heal from what others have done to us or oppressed us over, decades, centuries. But we have to heal from the things that we have laid on our own shoulders as a community. Are you Black enough? You should always be in survival mode. Take the job that you're given. Put your head down. Work hard. Don't expect nothing. I mean, you just like, then it's be strong. I got to do all that. Then I got to be strong. Who y'all? I'm tired. So it really is a problem when we have to heal from so many different things in the community, outside of the community. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation. Paul, talk to us about what you heard that you had to unlearn.
A taboo that I heard or learned growing up was Black family secrets should never be discussed outside the home. And as I said, I got the notion for writing my book during the talk at my daughter's wedding reception, and I spilled secrets that I had held inside for over 30 years, and essentially no one in that room knew those things except my wife. Not even my mother, who as I was talking, I tended to lock eyes with her in the audience, kind of to read her expression. And I also wonder what my dad would have thought if he were alive and at the reception, because he's probably the one who infused in me the most. Certain things ought not be talked about outside of home. But by talking about those things and sharing those things, it had a wonderful effect on me. I could feel a burden being lifted as I talked. The more I talked, the better I felt. And that's directly why, I went to my hotel room and immediately started writing, because I wanted to hold on to that feeling that I was feeling at the wedding reception in divulging secrets. So
I think, I don't know if all of us, but most of us have heard that. And I'm going to definitely get to you, Keisha. When we talk about this idea of divulging secrets or telling secrets, as writers, guess what we do, y'all? We tell secrets. Even if you're writing fiction, every character is a piece of maybe you, your grandmom, your mom, your lady down the street. You're building characters based on people you know. You're building situations based on situations that are familiar with you. So when we get to this place of writing, sitting down to actually pour out all of our feelings on paper, we have to get to a place where we are comfortable telling secrets, because that's what you're going to end up doing. And so that's going to be the next question after we get Keisha and anyone else who wants to respond to this one. We're going to talk about this idea of transparency and authenticity, and how do we get there as writers and stay there and put the truth on the paper, and what we've had to divulge in order to get to a place of clarity. So Keisha, talk to us about what you had to unlearn.
Well, there are two things I want to piggyback on, but briefly. I wrote a memoir entry that was published in the anthology, The Fire Inside. It was called Tears of a Goddess. And when I wrote this, it was about when neighborhood boys had lured me into a vacant house when I was 4 years old and sexually assaulted me. Mm. And I hadn't spoke of it. Like, at first I used to think it was a dream because it happened so long ago and no one in my family ever spoke about it. And then I wrote about it. And then I showed it to family members and people were like, oh, did you remember? Did this happen to you? So I gave voice to something that we're not supposed to talk about, even something that happened to me personally. It happened to the family. It was their shame that they felt. So a lot of times in the Black community, if something happens to an individual, it becomes the family shame. And so we have to unlearn that. And writing gives us our power over that. It disseminates that fear, and it gives us not only empowerment as an individual, but also helps heal the community. Because these children, these other 8 and 9-year-old children, when I was 4 years old, they're traumatized as well. So by keeping these secrets and not writing about them, it is, you know, it harms our community. So that's another stigma that we have about keeping things, I guess, on the down low. And just specifically, and I want to talk about what compelled me to write the Hopkins book, is that we were told as children, and a lot of things we were told as children is to keep us obedient and to also keep us safe. So we were told not to walk by Johns Hopkins at night, that people will snatch you off the street and all of these things. So there are a lot of urban myths that are rooted in actual experiences of our elders that weren't spoken. So we need to say out loud some of these things. So that's what I wanted to say.
I love it. And you're absolutely right. Urban myths, things that happen to us in our lives that we were taught not to talk about. Family secrets. We've got to keep those things inside, but begins to erode you from the inside. That pain, that trauma. And I think that is why these books are so important, because you have to deal with trauma. You have to deal with trauma. I say this all the time, and trust me, I've gotten ugly views. You know, I remember when I wrote my book, it was a fictional novel, and I had family pulling me to the side and saying, "Am I in the book?" And I remember thinking to myself, no. But the fact that there is this fear of being exposed, sometimes we need that exposure because we are harboring so much pain within us. We're not dealing with what's happening at the workplace, not dealing with being the strong mom. Oh my gosh, sitting in the closet and crying because we're so tired, instead of just going out there and kicking in a door and saying, "Ain't like I'll do. I'm not washing no more dishes, y'all." They'll just sit there until they pile up. I'm going out. I'm going to the movies. I do that because it gets to be overwhelming. So we're not dealing with things. We're not dealing with the incest, the rape, the Uncle Ray in living in the attic. He molested everybody in the family, but grandma don't want to put him in jail. We get that. These are the things, and we understand as writers that all of this comes from our history. The fact that the criminal justice system don't treat us fairly. The fact that workplaces don't always treat us fairly. We understand that once we start exposing things, other things are going to happen. It's going to be a domino effect. But sometimes to save yourself, once again, cultural barriers of care. This is self-care. My self-care is I've got to tell about that rape, because if I don't, I'm not going to be able to progress. So Dr. Wilborn, you had something else you wanted to add?
Oh gosh, y'all talking about trauma, shame, like this is my lane. Y'all talking my language here. I'm like, yes, because as a therapist, one of the things cultural barriers to care is the idea that Black people don't get therapy, right? There was a question you posed earlier that I was raising my hand to respond to, so I'll try to respond from my place of memory. But I just want to sort of highlight the unlearning of the idea that Black people don't get therapy. Y'all, therapy is beautiful. Mm-hmm. Therapy saved my life as a therapist, right? The first time that I was believed was my school counselor, my 10th grade school counselor at McMain Magnet School. Shout out to my Mustangs, who believed what I had to say about what was happening at my house. Because in my house, again, we know y'all don't talk about it, don't tell it. But I had to tell it because I was struggling. I was a gifted student struggling in school because I had domestic violence happening at my home. And my school counselor believed me. And I think that being believed started a trajectory of the power of somebody sitting and bearing witness to your story and believing you, right? So I just want to plug that. Get therapy is great. It'll save your life. But I wanted to respond to the question that I thought that I heard earlier. And I'll just try to respond from a place of memory. Part of when I finally penned the manuscript for this book, it happened in 2020. Y'all know what was going on in 2020. At the start of 2020, the pandemic, right? And so I knew that I needed to write this book, but there were parts of chapter 2 is where I really kind of get into the experience of the workplace discrimination and the impact that it had on me. And it was a chapter that I was reluctant to write because there was some truth that I needed to tell in that story that at the time I was not comfortable sharing because I was a practicing counselor at the time. And I knew that sharing some of those pieces of that story, if read by my clients, if it had come out at a time where my clients would have been able to read it and I was practicing, it would have been the thing in the room that I didn't want to be the thing in the room, because my client's thing needed to be in the room, not Wilborn's trauma. And so 2020 opened up a beautiful, and we know how painful 2020 was and continues to be in its residual effect. But what it did for me is the pandemic gave two things happened during that time. The pandemic allowed me to fall apart. Mm-hmm. That was important for someone who was always taught to be put together and pulled together and be together, right? Because my grandmother, was a woman, raised us in the project. And for her, being clean and decent meant something, mm-hmm. right? People treated you better when you were clean and decent. So appearance was always a thing. Looking strong was a thing. 2020 allowed me to fall apart. And it allowed me to be vulnerable in a space that oftentimes I was not vulnerable in. And it also allowed me to sort of pull back together the things that I wanted to keep and leave on the floor the things that I wanted to leave. That's one thing. Two, being called into the ministry happened in 2020. And so when I realized that God was calling me into the ministry for the second time, which this time I was actually ready. I actually said yes, it was ready. It meant that I had to retire from the work as a clinician, go back to school. So I'm in Nashville because I'm actually in school again, because only God has a sense of humor to send somebody with a PhD back to school, because God is funny like that. But because I knew I was stepping into the ministry, I knew that I was walking away from the counseling. And so I could tell the truth of my story in chapter 2, which included that as part of my dealing with being discriminated against, I drank. Here's the therapist who talks about drinking and drinking so heavily that she passes out. Mm-hmm. That is in the book. But I couldn't tell that story before 2020. That part of the story couldn't get written. It had to get written because it was part of the work. I wanted my readers to be able to see, listen, I struggle just like you struggle. We all struggle in this thing. But the timing was right for me to allow for that truth to be told. And, those who have read my book have said, like, wow, I can't believe you actually talked about that. I had to tell that. But there was a timing and a place for me to be able to tell it. And I think that's the power of nonfiction writing and the power of truth. Truth allows you to be free to tell it like it is. And so I apologize if that wasn't the question you asked, but that was the way that I heard it. And so that's how I'm responding to it.
No, I love that you responded in that way, because when you said you fell apart during COVID, I teared up. Because I did the same. I think that, and that's what we're going to talk about, this idea of authenticity and transparency and what we're exposing. But as we talk about that, I want to hear from everybody about what you learned about yourself in this process as well. And Emerald, I haven't heard from you, but I definitely have heard from your husband, who wanted to give you a shout out. So that was sweet. I love that. So Emerald, talk to us about this idea of, as Dr. Wilborn said, you have to, you fall apart in order to come back to yourself, to find yourself, in order to be authentic on the paper. A lot of our families don't want us to write a nonfiction book. Okay. I'm going to be honest with you. A lot of them are praying that you never tell the story, your story, because of what it's going to reveal. But in revealing these things, we can heal not only ourselves, but generations behind us, generations behind them. Because once that authenticity, once that honesty comes pouring, if it's done right and you're not trying to hurt anybody, you're just trying to heal, you're going to do some great things. So tell me, Emma, what did you learn about yourself in writing your books?
Um, I learned about how I used to sugarcoat things a lot. I learned not to sugarcoat things. Even in my fiction novels, I'm very raunchy and I'm very straight to the point because keeping it real is not always pretty. And I learned, some people may not like it because some people don't like the truth, but um I don't. That's what I learned about myself. It's just hard to sugarcoat things in my writing. I like to tell it what it is. If it was nasty, it was nasty. If this was done, this was done. And like what we talked about, the stigma that we had to break. I was taught to, always look put together and, not say certain things about how you will be viewed. So writing gave me that platform to say how I felt and put it out there, because even with my fiction novels, some people did get offended, or they was like, "Ooh, that was too much." Well, that was the reaction I wanted, because I mean, writing gives you that creativity to tap into that, and just come from a place of transparency.
Absolutely. And if you're not authentic in your work, the reader knows it. The reader is very smart. Okay, they're not, I mean, to read a book, you have to have an amazing imagination and you have to be able to build a story in your head from words that you're reading. It's not a movie. These are, you have to use your own amazing imagination in order to build that plot, that scene, and develop those stories. And the readers are so intelligent and they know when you just Google something and put it in a book, they're like, this ain't real, especially when you're writing nonfiction. If you're going to write nonfiction, tell the story. Don't tell me that you went through COVID, you fell apart, but then you came out of it and you were just perfect. Everything was just perfect. You know, that's the challenge with these with what we're doing, is that we have to get to a place of being authentic. Anybody else want to talk about what you learned about yourself in your work? Winifred?
So I've always kind of been like a very quiet, reserved person. I've always loved writing, but I was more so into like fiction and poetry. But what I learned about myself during the process of writing this book, and then when the book came out, was, that my voice matters, that my unique experience is something that people want to know about. And that was really the connecting piece to it all, because anyone can write a book about toxic work environment. There's tons of them, but when I started to share my own personal experiences, which in the book at the very end, I do go over some specific things that happened to me, and those stories were really the parts that people really were like, whoa, like, girl, what? Or people were saying, oh, I went through something similar. And so it really just showed me that even though I am, a quiet, kind of reserved person, that the power is in my story, not just as a writer, but just in general. Like, telling your experiences, it inspires others, it teaches others, it heals others, as we're talking about healing. And so I feel like it's my duty, honestly, like going through all the things that I've been through, and to be able to come out on the other side with wisdom. I feel like that is a big part of my purpose, is to not just get myself out of a situation and move on with my life, but to bring the community along with me. So that's what I learned.
And definitely, I'm going to get to everyone. The next thing we're going to talk about, though, is that moment you knew you had to write. So I want y'all to think about that as well as we go through this question, because, we all have experiences, and some of us just tuck them away and forget about it. And then some of us, and then as someone said, as Paul said, I think Ty, you said it too, at some point you have to say to yourself, I need to write about this. There is somebody else who's going to heal from this story. There's somebody else who needs to read this. Even if it's just that one person who reads it and heals, I've done my job, but I've got to tell this story. But before we get to that, let's keep on down this pathway of what did you learn about yourself in this process. Natima?
Thank you. I think one of the biggest lessons for me, especially sharing my healing journey, was I recognized that not all parts of me were broken. Some were actually just incomplete. which wasn't my fault, right? I didn't get some of the things I needed growing up because my parents didn't have it to give because they didn't have it, right? So again, pointing back to those generational patterns. But one of the greatest things that when I did begin to embrace my transparency and my vulnerability, which is also very key when writing, we have to be willing to be vulnerable, is it acted as a permission slip for other women. When women read our stories, they're like, wow, I now have the courage to tell my story. So not only is it empowering, but it's like, here's an opportunity now for you to share your story. And the last thing that I got from all of my books and all of my writing experiences, even the one I'm working on now, is I prided myself in the past, being intelligent. Like I have multiple degrees and, going back to school even now and as a law student, I was like, oh, I'm so smart, I'm so intelligent. But writing and maturing and healing really took intelligence to wisdom, which is completely different. And I am a completely different woman because I had to abandon some things, including that perfectionism and, oh, I'm so smart and look at all of my accolades, look at all my degrees on the wall. The wall was sagging because of it, but I had no wisdom. I wasn't making wise choices. And so again, writing and sharing with the world, it was like, wow, I really have embraced wisdom versus leaning on intellect and intelligence. So those are just a few of the things that writing has done for me.
I love that wisdom, because that is what it takes in order to put it on paper. It takes wisdom to deal with yourself. It takes wisdom to be honest about your situation. Absolutely, Ty.
So, a couple of things that I learned. One was that for a long time, I didn't see my mother as a whole person outside of her role as being my mom. And that's one of the things that we spend some time on in the beginning of the journal is like, did your mom accomplish her hopes and dreams? What were some things, or what was her favorite book? What was her favorite song? Like, how much did you see her as a woman outside of that role? Right. And so that really helped me and helped our relationship. In there also, like I polled women and asked a whole bunch of questions. One of the questions I asked was to my mom was, if you could do anything differently, would you? And she said, I wouldn't have been as strict. And I was like, wait, can you say that again? And she was like, I wouldn't have been as strict. And for me, that was healing. Right? Because if I wouldn't have asked her that question, I would have always assumed that she thought she was absolutely right with things that she did when I didn't allow her to grow and wisdom, right? And realize, you know what? I didn't have to do that. We didn't have to have some of those rules. I was doing what I thought I needed to do. So that really did, like, again, just open up a lot and provide some healing for me, and in ways that I certainly encourage other women to do, as well as there's a big part of like your relationship with your mom as adults, because we're the mothers of adults far longer than we're the mothers of children, but we don't think about it that way. Right. We think about like when they're in our house. And so one of my goals is to raise kids that come home when they don't have to. Right. Like I'm guaranteed like 18 Christmases with all of my kids, but I want 35. I want 55. Right. I want them to want to come home because of the space that we provided. So.
Love that. Love it. You guys got me all thinking about things and, Mel.
I'm trying to unmute. I think one of the biggest things that I took away or that I learned in my writing was that perfect Patty doesn't have to be perfect. I walked around with this idea that I had to be this. Like I couldn't be broken. I couldn't be hurt. I couldn't be going through emotions. I had to be the strong friend. I had to be that person that held everything together. And realizing that I'm the one that gave people the permission to see me that way because this is who I presented. So I had to now give people the permission to now see me in my flaws and see me in my hurt and see me in, my destruction. And at that point say, well, you're gonna have to love me in this space because this is the real me, not the masked version of me, that I presented to you. And sometimes that's hard to let go of, because you want to be seen or viewed or pictured in a certain light, but then at the same time you want people to help you or to comfort you or to empathize with you. But how can they do that if you never show them that side of you? And so in my writing process and writing these books, it helped me to put that out there and really let people see, you know what, well, here's all this time that you thought that I had it all together and that you thought that everything was great. Here, let me let you see all that was really going on behind this closed curtain. And now I can show up, and I can show up in my authentic space and not feel away. If I feel like I need to cry, I can cry, and I'm not going to feel like, oh, well, how are they going to see me? It's not about how you see me, because I have to see me first. And then once I see me, then I can give you the permission to be able to see me.
Love it. Anybody want to talk? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was just saying that's probably the biggest thing I took away from that writing was like learning to own myself in all the facets of me.
Let's talk a little bit about what you've heard from your readers. Anybody want to throw out what is the most impactful thing you've heard from how it moved you? We're just going to take one or two of you. Dr. Wilborn?
Well, I can reserve my comment for others who want to maybe share, but I'll just say I think the consistent thread of feedback has been feeling seen in the work, and feeling like the work is indeed impacting them in the way that I was hopeful that it would be, which is to give folks actual strategies and tools. So that's, as a writer, you want to know that your work is impacting folks and people see themselves in the work, but also to know that if you are intending for the work to be helpful, that people are actually finding it that, and that's the feedback I'm getting.
Good. Paul, speaking for the only man on the screen, talk to us about some of the things that you've learned from other men who've read your book, or do you have questions? You get questions from men to say, man, I can't believe you put all that in that book. Have you had that experience?
I don't think I have. What I have noticed is I got a lot of feedback, very personal feedback to the book. I mean, I've written other books, as I mentioned, that have sold far more than White Man's Disease. But White Man's Disease had an impact on people where they sought me out. They reached out to me. I actually, I don't know if you can see this, but I put together a collage of some of the comments, that unsolicited comments I received from readers, and I pull that collage out every once in a while when I need some inspiration to write. But I don't know that I received anything specific. When I look at the comments, I will say most of them are women, but some are men. But not too many people said, I can't believe you said that. So.
Okay. All right, cool. We've got a couple of, most of these are comments more than questions. So if anybody out there, if you have any questions, you can please drop those. We're going to talk a little bit about publishing our books and marketing our books probably in about 15 minutes. But we wanted to just continue on this path of just talking about the idea of writing these books. And I think they're so healing. Like everything that I'm hearing is that everyone here had to get to a deep place of understanding themselves. They had to accept things about their lives. They had to deal with their past, with the impacts of things that happened in their childhood to get to a place of authenticity. But I wanted to hear from a few of you about that moment when you knew you had to write. And this is important for our writers because sometimes when it comes to nonfiction, whether it's a memoir, autobiography, or if you're writing a cookbook, whatever it is, you're constantly questioning, are you an authority enough to write this? Am I wrong? Everybody had to ask themselves that question. I even asked myself that about writing fiction. Am I qualified to write this? And as a writer, we have to be able to answer that question with a resounding yes. But we first need to hit some benchmarks. You need to be able to write from a place of experience. For instance, I had someone who wrote a book. I knew someone who wrote a book about marriage, but they'd never been married before. Anybody want to take that? Is that what we're looking for? Yes, they can come from different perspectives of the marriage process, but the reality is that a lot of us we have to trust our writer. So we want to make sure that the writer has come to this moment educated, researched, and ready to move forward. So let's talk a little bit about that moment. And Keisha, I haven't heard from you. I know I know you're in the process of writing a book. Is that correct? Is she? You're muted.
All right. Yeah. Sorry about that. I was having some problems. Yeah. So I've been working on this book, and I know we'll talk later maybe about the publishing process. So I have some ups and downs with my book, and I'll save that a little bit later. But when did I know I had to write this? Was actually, like I said, I've been collecting a lot of this information about the urban legends of Johns Hopkins and just the impact that it's had on the Black community for since I was able to breathe, actually. But it wasn't until 2019 when there was, after the first uprising in 2015, and then in 2019, Hopkins wanted to expand and get policing powers. And so there was another student-led demonstration where the students at Hopkins locked themselves in one of the buildings to protest them getting the legislation that would actually give them state policing powers. It's not them getting their own little private police force. I mean, they would have the power to subpoena. They would be like their own individual city, like Johannesburg or something. It was ridiculous. And so it was during those struggles that I realized that I had to write the book that connected the trauma that Hopkins has had on the Black community, and that they have been able to wield certain powers unchecked over such a long period of time that led them to this moment of being able to get policing powers. And I had to write it from a Black person's perspective, right? Because we're normally on the margins. It's like, okay, this is, they normalize what's happening for the greater community and then put the Black community on the peripheral. Like, here's how Black people could be affected. And I wanted to center our experiences. So it was at that point of the relationship between the city, the government, Hopkins, and putting Black Baltimore on the margins that I knew that I had to write this particular book about the medical experimentation that was going on in Hopkins for generations.
Excellent. One more person. I want you to talk about that moment you knew. Somebody we haven't heard from. Emerald.
When I knew it was time to write the nonfiction book was with me and my co-author Crystal, when we had so many things trigger us all the time. People, triggered us and they didn't even know they made us mad, and our therapy was talking on the phone, like, what homegirls do, but talking every day about things that troubled us or, what someone did and how we felt about it. And I noticed it was helpful for us. So I said, our situations is similar. We need to write about this because, certain things that trigger us and people didn't even know. Like for my husband, for example, he'll talk about in high school, we partied all night, we did this and did that. So I'll call my homegirl, like, we can't relate to that, our mama didn't like that, or we, didn't have those type of luxuries. And that was triggering for me or triggering for us. So I knew it was time to write when we felt like our situations, we thought it was uncommon, but talking to different women, it was so much common. So I knew it was time to tell our truth. by the end.
Excellent. So we're going to go to some of these questions and I'm going to put them up. This is from Denise. She says, considering all that has been discussed, what is the best way to encourage people to buy and read your nonfiction book? Mel? You're muted.
Oops, sorry, I thought I hit it. I think first off, it's you almost when you're ready to put your book out, you have to be prepared for people not to read it. You know, you have to write it with like, I'm writing this for me because I feel like this is a story that needs to be told, and that it will get to and touch those that it needs to touch. And if you write it from that standpoint of authenticity, that you're putting this out there because you feel like it's going to be of help, it will get to where it needs to go. I don't think it's something that you can necessarily force, but also you do need to promote. I mean, start within your inner circle, the people that are closest to you, you know, your community, your family, your church, your work, you know, the people that are closest to you, and get it to them. And because they are the people that know you the best and have the best relationships with you, they'll share it. And, you know, of course, we talk about social media and marketing and all that, but word of mouth is the best, you know, form of marketing. When you hear it from someone that you trust and then someone that they trust, it'll spread faster. But I think first and foremost, before you put your book out, you can't even go into it with the mindset of, I need to sell 500 books, I need to sell 100 books. That can't be your why you release the book, or, you know, your premise for putting it out there. It's just like, I have a story that I need to tell, and I'm going to be authentic about it and put it out there. And when people see that, it draws, you know, attraction and energy. Energy attracts energy. So, you know, that's be my first input on that.
Excellent. Winifred, and then Dr. Wilborn. Mm-hmm.
For me, I really had to step outside of my comfort zone and really just put myself out there. I can say majority of my sales have come from my social media supporters, my summer lovers, as I like to call them, because I would get up, show up online, get on live, post reels or whatever kind of content relating to the book. I feel like it's one thing to just say, hey, everybody, I wrote a book, and maybe the cover of the book is nice or it has a catchy title and people will be interested. But consistently showing up, putting yourself in different spaces, whether you're featuring on somebody's podcast, as was mentioned, word of mouth, just kind of being a person that just doesn't say, okay, I wrote the book and that's enough. Because it's not going to be enough. I can tell you right now, no matter how popular you are, how many friends you have, you know, it's not going to be enough just to say, hey, I did it. You want to really make that information come out and catch people, and you want to continue to put yourself out there. So I hope that's helpful. Not everybody is into social media, and I understand. And there are other ways to put yourself out there besides social media. But for me personally, that has worked wonders for me.
I am 100% on board. I tell you, social media is an inexpensive way to promote yourself, and one of the few ways that you can get up every day and do it yourself, creating reels and posts, and you don't have to spend a great deal of money. I do recommend boosting your posts, but definitely utilize social media. Have a digital footprint, something that I really push. I have a PR marketing firm, so I've been doing videos for different organizations now on book marketing, and I tell you, social media is a good one, because if you want to go buy TV ads and radio ads, you're going to spend a lot of money. You're going to spend a month. I got a quote yesterday for 2 weeks of TV ads, 26 spots, $7,000. Now, if that's what you want to do, can it move the needle? Yes. But do you want to do that? Do you have the funds? It's something you have to ask yourself. So, Dr. Wilborn, let's hear from you.
Yes. So I think two things sort of come to mind as it relates to the question that's been posed. I think one of the best ways to encourage people to buy and read your book is, first of all, I think it's important to really know your audience and who you're speaking to and what it is that they need. And I think part of the appeal for my book is having sat in the space, you know, someone who understood this area that I was speaking to from a clinical space, from a personal space, from a research space. I knew that what was missing from the market was a book that not only talked about the implications of what happens to us at work, but rather the implications mentally and physically coming from someone who is a therapist to talk about that. That was not in the market. And because I went the traditional book publishing route, shout out to Balance, who is the imprint that my book is published under, is an imprint of Hachette, which is the third largest book publishing in the world. Part of that sell to pitch your book to, when you go the traditional book publishing route, is they want to know what's different about your book. There's 1,000 different books, Wilborn. Why is your book different? Yeah, there might be 1,000 different books, but what's missing in the market is a book that speaks about workplace experiences from a wellness issue that then actually gives self-care and self-empowerment as strategies to address that. So I think being able to know your audience and speak to their needs is one thing. And then the second thing I would say is, can people tell that you are interested in this, in getting them to buy your book or this topic beyond your book? So if somebody goes on my Instagram, I'm not just promoting my book, by the way, Dr. Tammy Lewis Wilborn on Instagram. I'm speaking to and offering wellness tips and strategies that are not even in my book, because I am concerned about the wellness and well-being of not only Black women, but Black people. So there is a genuine investment in well-being, because I know that when I'm well, we're well. When we're well, our communities are stronger and better together. So there's a genuine interest beyond just selling my book to speak to the Black community and being well. And so I think when people know that you genuinely are appealing to them because you genuinely care about them and what their needs are, I think that is an attractive sort of marketing tool.
Excellent. I think this question is for you, Emerald, or maybe for you, Ty. Let's start with you. It says, when we speak on men and women, men versus women raising children methods, I think we attribute a lot of it to a son needs a male figure. My question is, in your book, do you touch on father-daughter dynamic? On the father-daughter dynamic. Emerald.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes, in my book, I do touch on that. I touch on both perspectives. I touch on my husband raising our daughter, and I talk about my personal experience with my father raising me. And yes, it definitely holds a lot of weight too. So we definitely touch on that too.
Okay. And give us the name of your book again.
It's called The Double Standard. It will be out this fall, and it's with Simone, myself, and my co-author, Crystal Mitchell.
Excellent, excellent. So let's talk a little bit, ladies and gentlemen, about this book publishing. And Paul, we're going to start with you about did you self-publish, or did you use a traditional publisher or vanity publisher? And what did you learn in that process of publishing your book, The White Man's Disease? And just because I love that title so much, very, very, very quickly, because we are coming up on the last 25 minutes. I know I told you guys this time was going to go by fast. Tell us, what is the white man's disease? I always think it's interesting when you talk a little bit about that, but very quickly tell us that.
Well, I don't know that I can tell you very quickly. If you did a search in Google for white man's disease, you'd get 64 million hits. Sometimes there'll be hits about AIDS. Sometimes there'll be hits about Parkinson's disease. Sometimes there'll be hits about tuberculosis. The interesting thing about my story, White Man's Disease, is of those 64 million hits, it's almost none of them. Well, thankfully, it's actually the first few hits you get if you search on White Man's Disease, or among the first few hits will be about my book. So that's a good thing. I'm happy about that. But none of those 64 million hits, other than the ones about my book, are about my story. It's uniquely mine. In fact, somebody made a comment. His name or her name was Unapologetically Me. And they wrote, "It's your story, and that makes you highly qualified." So it's truly my story. I can tell you that the phrase white man's disease, I got that from a white man. Some of you who are old school might have heard of him. His name is Don Criqui, a sportscaster, and I heard him say it in the 70s and on national TV, and I damn near fell out my chair. I said, "What did he just say?" Because I know that if a black man had said that, he'd have lost his job. And so I held on to that title. I held on to that. I remembered that for years and years and years. Little did I know that it would become very relevant to my situation. So I know that didn't explain what white man's disease is, because I don't know that I can do it in sort of an elevator talk. But it is uniquely mine.
Okay. Talk to us about how you publish your book.
So traditional publishing never was a thought because, as I said, the book was done when I was 60 years old, and I felt like I didn't have time or patience or inclination to go through a query process and get do the kinds of things that you have to do to get traditionally published, which is as most of us know, is very, very difficult. So I knew right away that I was going to self-publish. So I self-published with a small black-owned self-publishing services firm, and had great results. And then, because self-publishing fit me, was so good for my situation, when I wrote subsequent books, they all were self-published as well.
Okay. Well, I want to give a couple of highlights on this whole idea of nonfiction writing. Some stats here, because like I said, these are the books that really changed my life growing up. And if anybody out there, if you have some books that really changed you, I know the autobiography of Malcolm X was one of the first ones that really just turned the page for me as a young girl. I read it when I was 13, but from there, like I said, every heart there was always some nonfiction book that I turned to help to grow grow me from a wisdom perspective, because that's really what I was searching for. I read a lot of books by T.D. Jakes. I read a lot of books by Joyce Myers. I read a lot of books about parenting when I became a parent, and these are the things that really changed the needle, changed the game for me. But when you look at some of the data, some of the most popular nonfiction genres is memoirs and autobiographies, biographies, cookbooks, art and photography books, self-help and personal development books, motivational, inspirational books, health and fitness and history. And as of 2022, over 788 million copies of print books are sold in the US in 1 year. While this figure presents a drop from a record-breaking 2021, because everybody was publishing during COVID, y'all. Just to let you know, print sales are still well over pre-pandemic levels. Most of the books out there now, nonfiction books have finally edged out. There are more nonfiction books out there than more fiction books than nonfiction. But for a very long time, especially during the pandemic, nonfiction books were on a rise because a lot of talk was around racism and civil injustices, and so those books were soaring. And so this is a $7 billion industry, writing nonfiction books. Now, that's just, and we're talking about it from a numbers perspective, but when we talk about it from a healing perspective, how many people are being touched and healed by your work is huge. And I will hope that everyone out there will continue to write. And that's why I wanted to kind of talk about this subject, because I know a lot of you are writing nonfiction books, but you need to hear from people who have been there and done that, to their process and how they're writing their books. And as Paul said, he chose self-publish. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But what I want to talk about now is beyond just, because we're going to hear from everybody about this, how they publish their books. But we also want to stress the importance of putting out a great piece of work. Okay, whether you're self-published, non-published, vanity published, I don't care how you publish. Get a professional editor, have your covers done professionally, Make sure you have a good book synopsis. Make sure you have a marketing strategy. Don't write a book and then go hide, because you're not going to sell it. I don't care how you published it. It's not going to work that way. So I have self-published 3 books. I have used a vanity publisher in the past. I've never really gone after a traditional publishing deal, but I do know a lot about the process. And so those are definitely good options. So Emerald, let's go to you, since we've heard from Paul about how did you publish, and just very quickly tell us, how did you publish, and is there any things? What's your major marketing tool? Just one of those marketing tools.
Okay, I self-published. I went through Ingram Spark, low cost, and paid for an editor, and definitely got my book cover done. And I'm sorry, what was your second question?
Just one of your key marketing tips, like how do you market your book?
I market my book by constantly posting at least 3 times a week. And for me, I don't know if it'll work for others, but getting my book in different magazines and promoting my books to different audiences helped me a lot too.
Excellent, excellent. And with that said, we have directtoauthor.com. For those of you who are out there who are looking for a way to promote your book, you can upload it. It is a platform that I created back in December of 2021. We now have almost 300 books. You can upload your book for free. It's direct2author.com. We want everybody to put your books out there because we are promoting independent authors. The vast majority are African American authors. And so it's just a great way to connect with readers. Ty, tell us about how did you publish your book and some of your marketing tips.
So I also self-published. I have 2 books right now. One is a children's book, The Alphabet of You, which is filled with positive vocabulary, actual pictures of children, and the ASL sign. And kind of like what was said earlier, I intentionally self-published because I wanted to use the pictures I wanted to use in the book, right? And I didn't want someone telling me, no, like this picture shouldn't be there. And as far as marketing the books, one of the ways that I end up doing that is through a lot of events. So whether it's the library events that are, ongoing, or having speaking engagements in front of moms and or parents. That's one of the things I'm doing now.
Excellent. And everybody on the screen, drop your information, your URL to your book in our comment area. If you can't do that, put it in the private chat and I'll drop it on there for you. Thank you so much, Ty. I really appreciate that. And if you want to tell people also how they can get your book, and we'll quickly go back to Emerald and to Paul for that. But Ty, can you give us your URL? You have a website?
Yes, it's timewithty.com. And if you want the books, go to timewithty.com shop.
Great. Okay. Emerald, how can we get your books?
You could get my books on Amazon, Deceit by Simone, and that's where the Double Standard will be at as well, along with Barnes and Nobles and Kindle Books.
Excellent. And Paul?
Oh, and Walmart.com.
Excellent. Paul?
You can get White Man's Disease in ebook on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. Or anywhere you shop for digital books. I used to sell the paperback through Amazon, and I have now a dwindling supply. I think I have less than 10. So I fulfill those orders myself from home, and they can be ordered. The paperbacks can be ordered from my website, which is whitemansdisease.com.
Excellent. Mel, let's get to you. Let's hear about your marketing and how did you publish, and then be sure to tell us how we can get your books.
Absolutely. I self-published my children's books, and then the books with the Diamond Riders were published through Natima's company, TGI. I market mostly, on my website and then on social media. I also do vending or pop-up shops at certain events locally. And I kind of always have books with me in my car. you just never know. Like, I walk with books with me all the time. And sometimes you'll hear a conversation or you'll be out and spark a conversation that'll be an outlet to, so you just never know where you'll meet somebody. So I definitely make sure I always have them on hand. But primarily through social media and on my website.
Excellent, excellent. Dr. Wilborn?
Yes, so I just want to encourage the writers real quick. The path to one yes is filled with many no's. And so keep going, particularly if you are looking to pursue the traditional book publishing route, which is the route that I took. So I'm published with Balance, which is an imprint of Hachette Book Publishing Group. So I have a literary agent, and I think for me, the beauty is I have a team of folks who are women of color who really bought into the vision of the book. Marketing is, so because I have a traditional book publishing deal, the marketing is a mix of what the Balance does in terms of their marketing efforts, but also personally, I am a professional speaker, and so I speak and sell books when I'm, speaking. Also, social media, and I think it was, I can't remember who said it earlier, but I think it's always like, I literally had a conversation with someone in the parking lot the other day. I was coming out of Vanderbilt bookstore and struck up a conversation, and they were like, "Oh, I want to buy your book." And I was like, "It's actually in Vanderbilt's bookstore, go for it." But I also have books in the car. And so having books on me and kind of talking about the work keeps the book alive.
Excellent, excellent. Natima?
Sorry, I couldn't unmute. But yeah, sorry. All of our books can be found on Amazon and BarnesandNobles.com, or BN.com actually is their site. Also on the DiamondWriters.com website. We're currently sold out, but we will be replenishing books shortly. So for right now, just direct to Amazon or Barnes and Nobles. In terms of how I sell the book, very much like a lot of the panelists here, just being a speaker, really connecting with the audience. I think it's important to, share excerpts from the book. That's how you really attract from a relatability standpoint. Like, they read something like, "Oh, I can relate to that. There's more in the book. You should get it." But my biggest strategy has been selling myself, selling the storyteller, and then selling the stories. And that's really how we get as much support as we do, because people are attracted to you and then they are attracted to your story. And so that has been the most effective way to share our books.
Absolutely. And I know my friend Reginald is out there now. He posted it early about people will buy you before they buy your book. Yes, selling yourself is important because it's a trust factor. And so, especially when you're trying to sell me on something where you're saying you're a subject matter expert in this particular area, I need to trust you. So that speaking engagements, when you go live, talk about different topics, share information, be a source for the people around you. These types of things, these podcasts, and just so everyone know, the way we select our podcast members is what, guys, you just fill out the form and we contact you. That's it. I don't know everybody on the screen. I like to keep it this way. I'm getting to know them while you're getting to know them. We want to have like-minded people in that they are writers, but they're all coming from different areas, and they're all approaching this topic in a different way. So we do thank everyone for being with us. Keisha?
Hi, yeah. So the memoir that I've referenced, The Tears of a Goddess, that sort of chronicled the abuse that was in my family, is included in an anthology called The Fire Inside, Volume 2. It is accessible on Amazon. The editor is Victoria Adams Kennedy. The book that I'm currently writing, the Johns Hopkins, The Body Snatcher Hospital, I started on the traditional route. A lot of my friends coming out of academia were also on the traditional route, so I started that. And I thanks for the the vote of confidence. The query letters, I've had a lot of positive responses and getting agents and so forth. So I've just been really focused on that. And what I alluded to earlier in my introduction is that Hopkins is an extremely powerful entity by itself. And just what happened was I had a chapter, and a magazine paid me to publish one of the chapters of my books, and of my book, I'm sorry. And long story short, they paid me a kill fee to not publish it. After the second edit, working with the editors of the magazine, because they reached out to Hopkins about a comment or something, and then they said, we've decided not to publish your chapter. So I may be going the self-publishing route, and I'll just stop it there because it's a lot to go up against Johns Hopkins in general. So I'll stop there. But you can find the anthology on The Fire Inside by, again, Victoria Adams Kennedy. Thank you.
Thank you, Keisha. Thank you so much for being with us. Winifred?
I also went the self-publishing route. I used Amazon KDP, and I do a little bit of everything. Instagram is like my main social media where I get the most engagement. So that's Writing by Winifred on IG, but I also do speaking engagements. I have merch, and sometimes people see the merch first, and then through that, they're like, okay, what's this Winifred Summer person about? And then they learn about me, and just anywhere I am. I was on a cruise doing karaoke, and at the end, I was like, by the way, I have a book out, and da-da-da-da, and people were coming up to me after, like, well, how do we get it? Always having business cards, and people think business cards are like a lost art or something, but people still want business cards. So, you know, still keep things with you that you can pass out. And so, yeah, that's it for me.
Well, everybody, I want to give everyone randomly, we can give a few kind words and motivating words to our writers out there. Of course, the Black Writers Workspace is a space where we share information. So this PenPOSSE is all about just that. I think we've had such an amazing conversation. I've learned a lot. I do appreciate everyone who came and was very transparent about themselves, what they've learned, what the work has done for them. It was inspiring to me. I hope it was inspiring to those of you out there watching. We had a lot of questions, a lot of comments. I wasn't able to put them all up on the screen, but thank you for everyone who tuned in the entire 2 hours. This is going to be on YouTube. It is also going to be clips of it on Instagram, and it will forever be on Facebook. And also it'll be on Spotify. So we're going to upload it to Spotify probably within the next 24 hours. So if you follow us there, Michelle D. Jackson, you can also see it. I'm very proud to say that the PenPOSSE, or just my podcast, was recognized by FeedSpot as one of the best podcasts for Black writers. I was really excited about that. We're just sharing information. And for those of you who are writing, you know, there's not a lot of information out there, good information. You'd be amazed when you Google how to publish a book, you're going to get a million things. So we want to make sure that we kind of streamline this process for you. And looking at these faces, people who are out there doing fantastic work, I just want to say thank you so much to all of you. So if you can quickly give, just a final word, we're going to start with you, Winifred. Just a word to our writers to keep them motivated. And then we're going to wrap up this session of PenPOSSE.
Yeah, thank you again for having me. And I just want to encourage everybody to tell their story, especially for the introverts, someone who, falls in the introvert category. I've just been amazed at the things that I've been able to do once I decided that I was going to push through and give it 110%. So even if you're a quiet person, reserved person, step out of your comfort zone, definitely, and you'll be amazed at the support that you get. Keep writing. And you will find your tribe, as they say. So don't worry about if people in your family or friends don't seem to support you. Just do your thing, and you'll just see how everything falls together. So stay encouraged. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Keisha?
Find your muse. My muse has been the voice of my ancestors. I mentioned earlier that I'm an avid genealogist. I find tracing my family history to be therapeutic. It grounds me. It ties me into a sense of knowing and guidance. So if your muse, whatever your muse is, to trust it. And also, if you have the ability, not all of us do, to find our blood relatives and trace your family history, there are answers there.
Absolutely. Love it. Natima?
Thank you again, Author Michelle, for this opportunity. I really enjoyed this panel. Just keeping with the theme of healing through writing, I am a huge proponent of healing. And so even if you are not ready to publish, if you don't feel called to publish, please journal. Journal is such an amazing way to release the trauma, release the hurt, and get it off of you. And then that also can be the basis of your manuscript. Many of the things that I've published came from years of journaling. It's a great way to document your story and to really own your narrative. So I just want to encourage journal, journal, journal. Do not get tired of telling your story to you, because sometimes you don't even know what you're saying is a mantra or an affirmation for you. So that's really my advice. If you choose to publish, excellent, but still get your story on paper. So journal.
Excellent. Dr. Wilborn?
Thank you so much for having me and my fellow pen pals on the podcast panel today. I think a couple of things. You don't have to love the writing process, but I do think you have to have a love for the people you're writing for. Mm-hmm. The second thing I would say is have grace for your pace, have grace for your process. And then I guess maybe I'll throw a third in. Take care of yourself. Mm-hmm. Take care of yourself in this process. As you are working to do the work of uplift for the people, remember, we need you well. We need you whole. We need you free. So as you're working, doing the work to help us to do that, make sure that you are prioritizing the work that your soul must have, which is the work that you do for yourself. Thank you all so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being with us. Mel?
Well, thank you again for having me on today's show. It's been amazing to connect with other fellow authors in this community. So I'm glad to be here and was able to be here. I guess my words were to anyone, whether you are an aspiring author, in the middle of writing author, or just someone looking for inspiration, would be to know that nothing that you've gone through is insignificant. If you've experienced it, then you have a story to tell. And never feel like no one will understand or that you're the only one that's gone through it, because there's someone out there that has gone through something similar to you that is either in need of hearing your story or who is in need of knowing, or is looking, who's in need to hear your story, or someone that's out there that's looking to hear a story. So I would say just be authentic, be yourself, and don't let anybody tell your truth for you. It's your experience and only you can tell it.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being with us. Ty?
I would say continue reading. Read, consume as much as possible and see where the holes are. When you are reading a book and you're like, wait, no, that it didn't happen like that. Or, well, you can say that, but that hasn't been our experience. Or, right, that's where your voice stands out. Or if you're, listening to a book that you really love, but then you hear some stuff that's like sideways, or it maybe is language you don't care to use, or right there is going to be somebody who needs to hear what you need to say. The other pieces, your friends and family may not be your customer, right? So it's great. You will have people in your life who support you. And I have people who bought my children's book who don't even have kids because they're supporting me. I have other people in my life who have kids who haven't bought the book, right? Because they're not my customer. So don't get those two confused and get angry at your people for not being your customers when they might not be. So.
Love that. Thank you, Ty. Thank you so much. Emerald?
Thank you for having me on here. And my advice is be unapologetically you. You are enough. There may be a million people that's writing novels, but there's not a million people like you. So do it. Do it. That's my advice. Do it. Throw it out there, and you may touch a lot of people. So don't be discouraged.
Love it. Thank you so much. Paul?
To the aspiring authors out there, I just want to repeat unapologetically me's words. It's your story, so that makes you highly qualified. I just want to add to that, with respect to research. I'm sorry, with respect to nonfiction writing. Don't forget about research. Sure, it's your story, but you need to embellish it with a well researched piece. For readers out there, for everyone out there, just one last bit of marketing. If you know anyone who can use some healing, loving inspiration in their life, check out White Man's Disease.
Excellent. Excellent. All these great books. I love it. Thank you guys. This has been a wonderful Pen Posse. I'm just so happy to have the opportunity to host this initiative every month. We'll be putting out next month's topic, and we ask that everyone please sign up and we'll select from our group. We always look for between 7 to 8 different authors or writers in general, bloggers or journalists who are interested in sharing their story with us. This has been remarkable. Thank you so much. There have been people with us the entire time. So we do ask that everyone on the screen, you guys hold on, and we're going to wrap up here, but I want to give you a formal farewell. So be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to follow me at author Michelle D. Jackson. Also join our private Facebook group. We have over 14,000 writers and avid readers there, and it is called the Black Writers Workspace. Also, if you have written a book, please upload your book to direct2author.com so that you can join our book marketplace and we can promote you on our social media pages to over 15,000 writers and readers. Again, thank you all and have a great weekend.